might be wondering why I have a whiteboard today. Well, that's because today, what I want to do is I want to break down time travel in the MCU, because we've seen a lot of different examples of it. We saw it in Endgame, we saw it in Loki predominantly, we saw it in Miss Marvel, it's in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I figure before we get too far into the multiverse saga, or further into the multiverse saga, and, you know, going back to the quantum realm, and I'm sure dealing more with time travel, that I want to break this down, because we've seen so many different forms of time traveling, and we've seen so many examples of time traveling, and people like to say they contradict, but I actually am going to argue, and will keep arguing, that none of the time travel we've seen contradicts other versions of time travel that we've seen. Couple things before I do this. This is going to be a two-part video, because I do want to talk about the time travel in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that's a whole beast, so I'm going to make this a part 1, part 2. This will be dealing with the main MCU, and then part 2 will deal with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and what is going on with that, and deciphering that weird rabbit hole of time travel. And then second, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, move board, you're in my way. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would want me to talk about Deadpool 2 or Days of Future Past. Not going to, because completely different universe, and Deadpool's not here yet, meaning I don't have to talk about that. I'm sure I'll have to in Deadpool 3 when he's doing his time travel shenanigans, and it won't line up with what we've seen in the MCU, but I don't have to talk about that yet. And also, did Logan really time travel in Days of Future Past? Because doesn't time traveling kind of entail your body going back, not just your mind going into itself from 50 years ago and you being in a different body? I don't know, but hey, I guess if you break it down to its simplest, Kitty Pryde did have Logan time travel. Okay. Love it. Love to see it. Okay, we have a few different markers here that I'm going to be using. So we have a blue, green, red, and black. I could not find a thick black one, so I have to use a thin one. So I'm going to use the blue one to just sort of represent the main timeline and anything on it. Red is going to be involving Endgame stuff. Green is going to be Loki stuff. And I'm going to use black for Miss Marvel. So let's get my blue. And if I make a mistake, I do have an eraser. So, okay, I'm going to try to keep this as straight as possible. I make no promises. I'm not very good at this. I'm going to try to center it, not with the board, but with the camera here. Okay. I feel like I'm teaching right now. Mostly cracked myself up over me not being a scientist, now attempting to explain time travel. Wow, that is kind of straight. Not on camera, it's not, but it is. So let me actually make a key here. So blue, I'm just gonna label 616. I know 199999, but they call it 616. I'm gonna keep calling it that because it doesn't take as long to say. So Mon Vellani, I'm sorry, but that's just what I'm doing. Red is gonna be Endgame stuff. It's showing up, right? Yeah, cool. Making sure you guys can see that. Green is gonna be Loki. And then the setup for this video is going to be just as long as the actual video at this point. And then black, well, black square is Miss Marvel. So I'm going to talk about these in release order because I think it's easiest that way. And it also means we get to get the complicated and convoluted one out of the way first, because Endgame's is really gnarly. So, background here, we've all seen Endgame, but just for, you know, a bit of background. So, Endgame follows a theory, it's the branch timeline theory, or whatever it's called, which is the idea, if you go back in time and you start making changes, then you cause a branch reality. You're not actually affecting your main timeline. Hulk kind of explains this, although Hulk doesn't say it's when you make changes, he just says it's when you go back. So we have Hulk's explanation, which I'll play for you guys.
If you travel to the past, that past becomes your future. and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
Later in the movie, we have the Ancient One's explanation when she talks specifically about removing an Infinity Stone and causing a branch reality.
The Infinity Stones create what you experience as the flow of time. Remove one of the stones, and that flow splits.
So we kind of get two conflicting pieces of info. We have Hulk saying, if you go back, you screw with time. We have the Ancient One saying, if you remove stuff, you screw with time. It's complicated. I'm going to essentially stick to what scientists say. I'm going to kind of try to blend all three. I'm going to stick with the idea that if you go back, you start messing with stuff, that's what causes a branch. So even if that's not true, and even if it is just traveling back, it doesn't really affect what this is going to look like that much, because it just moves the timeline break from one point to like a couple minutes in the future, because Time Heist was not that long. So this little timeline I'm going to make here is going to look kind of weird. And let me use blue for this. So I'm going to say this point right here, this is going to be 2023, the year Endgame takes place. We're finally in that year, by the way. We've caught up to Endgame. Now, this I'm going to say is 1945, I think, is when Cap goes back. So let's say 1945. Now, logically, 2012 would be like here. I'm putting 2012 here. I know it's going to look weird, but the reason I'm putting it here is because I need a lot of room to be able to write stuff in this 11-year period. So we're going to have to, like, screw with the timeline a bit. So 45, 2012, 2023. So now I need the red marker, because this is where stuff starts going down. So basic idea here, we take the Avengers. I wish I had one of those pointer things that like kindergarten teachers have. So they go from 2023, they start jumping back. So of course, there's the 6 stones they're after. Cap, Tony, Ant-Man, and Hulk go back to 2012 Battle of New York. And they're in charge of getting, I'm writing this down so I don't lose track of which branches I've drawn. They're in charge of time, mind, and space, all right? So, feels like it needs a circle, right? So, they go, cloud coverage just came in, so we're turning that light on. So, they go, and Hulk immediately goes to the Ancient One, secures the Time Stone. Now, the question is, does the break happen when he goes back, or does the break happen when he gets the Time Stone? Because if the branch happens then, that means that for a while, there were actually 2 Hulks in the Battle of New York, and there were 2 Iron Mans in the Battle of New York. So, you never know. But either way, we have a branch in 2012 right here, because Hulk takes the Time Stone, which causes, I'm going to draw it this way. This is a branch, okay? So this is the branch caused by time, which Hulk secured. And then, of course, we have Cap's quest for the Mind Stone, which I think is amazing. That's such a fun little storyline. So here's the question, though. If the timeline breaks from a significant change, obviously, the people don't know. Cap's not Hydra. They think he's Hydra, which means the branch would have to happen sometime before then. So you never know. But anyway, let's just say here, Captain America takes... I'm going to draw this one going... I'll draw it close. So, right here is when Captain America gets the Mind Stone. So we have 2 branches coming out of... Actually, I'm going to need more room. So let me actually put this... Let me write this right here. So, Captain America gets the Mind Stone, and then there's the Tesseract. And the hunt for the Tesseract goes all kinds of wrong. They screw it up, right? They do not secure the Tesseract. So, let's say, because obviously there's stuff like Tony's heart attack and whatnot, so we're already looking at changes in what's happening. So, we have right here, this is the Space Stone. I'm gonna put my back to you guys real quick. Maybe you guys can see dog hair, I don't know. But this is failed. right? So Space Stone failed. But what else comes out of this branch? Loki. Because Loki gets away, he takes the Tesseract, and he just dips the hell out. He gets out of there. So we're actually looking at essentially a branch out of this branch. It's weird. So we have Loki. Alright? That's Loki and his Tesseract. And then, before I get to what the other Avengers are doing, Cap and Tony then both travel back. I can't remember exactly what year it is for the life of me, but they go back into the 70s to get the Tesseract. So we end up with, let's just say it's here. Ah! Boom. So this is the actual successful space. So that's how that mission goes down. And then if we come forward a little bit, I wish this was magnetic and these had magnets so I could just slap them on here, but we don't have that luxury. Let's just say 2014's here. Cool. So now we're looking right here's 2013, because this is where Thor and Rocket go to. Now there's two branches that we're looking at here. Because we're looking at, of course, the ether, which Rocket secures. He gets the reality stone. And then Thor gets Mjolnir. Now the question is, because the timeline was already screwed, does he get Mjolnir off of this timeline and this Thor just does not have a Mjolnir? Or does he get it off of here? And it's a completely separate thing. I'm just going to say it's this. I'm going to say it's reality / Mjolnir. Alright? So Thor gets that. And then we come to 2014 and we have a couple things that happen. We of course have Rhodey and you know what? I am going to draw a second one because I feel like it. Because it was, two different people who time traveled, two different changes, so we get a reality and a Mjolnir. If this is all wrong, it's okay, because it's less so about the specifics and more about the basic idea. So, Mjolnir and reality, and then we come to 2014, where we have the Power Stone mission and the Soul Stone mission. So, obviously, Rhodey and Nebula get that, and let me erase this, because we're about to have some bigger problems to solve with Endgame time travel. Now, I will be the first to say Endgame's time travel makes no sense, because if it made sense, I wouldn't be doing this video, would I? And people wouldn't still be asking this question 4 years down the line. So, we have a couple things, because we have power, which Rhodey and Nebula secure, and then we also have soul, which Hawkeye gets after Black Widow sacrifices herself, and then everyone jumps back to 2023. So that's all fine and dandy, right? We're all on the same page about how those branches work to get the stones, and then they take all 6 stones, they pop back to 2023. Did I just cut myself? I don't think I did. I was scratching my back. I think I scratched too deep. But things get complicated. I know a lot of people like to say Captain America, what he did makes no sense. I'm going to explain that away in a sec. Here's what does not make sense. Okay. He jumps from 2014 to 2023. So it's Thanos, Nebula, and Gamora. So here's why this works. Because this should not work. And yes, there's the whole plot hole of Pym particles and how they got them. Whatever, that's not what I'm doing here. So Tony kills Thanos. Nebula kills Nebula. And that leaves Gamora in the main timeline. Now, you would think by these 3 time traveling from 2014 to 2023 that would cause a branch and that the entire MCU as we know it should be doing that right now. But it's not. And the reason for that, at least I think, we got to keep in mind here with everything I say, these are not hard conclusions. This is just what I think is up. They jumped from a timeline that was already branching into the 2023 quantum tunnel. Meaning that they couldn't really cause a branch because they weren't jumping from the main timeline. They were jumping from something completely different. So basically, effectively to them, this was a branch. And that's why they can stick around and not cause a branch, which is why the final battle takes place in the main timeline. It's why we can have Gamora with the Ravagers and rejoining the Guardians and not causing a complete anomaly. It probably also explains why the TVA never had to prune this timeline, because I already explained it, right? So that answers that. Now, there is one more. There's one more thing, and this is the one everyone wonders about. And that is our friend, Steve Rogers. I was going to draw a star with a circle around it to represent a shield. Realized it would have been a pentagram, so we're not doing that. I don't care if that doesn't look like Captain America's shield. It's Captain America's shield. Captain America at this movie almost makes no sense. I've kind of come to terms with the fact that it doesn't make sense because the ending is so good, but it doesn't make sense. So, they clip all the branches, right? So Cap goes through and he wipes everything they messed with, goes away, right? So we have all this gone, all this gone, we have the 70s gone, we've got this gone. There is one loner timeline, and that's because of the Loki one, which we'll talk about in a sec when we get to Loki. But, yes, he goes through, he fixes everything they did that the Ancient One didn't like. Let me redraw my blue line here. And then he goes. He's like, cool, so I did that. Instead of doing that, let me go back here. Because I love Peggy Carter, right? He wants to be with Peggy Carter. And, I mean, have you seen Haley Atwell? We can't really blame him. But the question is, because then he randomly appears here. But he does not jump back through the quantum realm using the quantum tunnel. Meaning, how? How did he get back here? Okay? I think we have to look at this. There's one piece of information, and I think if we look at that, it helps explain why this is weird. When they time travel back, they don't go to the same spot that they were in. Alright? The reason they would jump back through the quantum tunnel is because they had set that location as where they're coming back to. So all we have to assume is that Cap didn't do that. If Cap just set it for a random place by the Avengers base, waited for himself to jump back to here, and then went to just jump back here, once he time travels back, he comes and sits on the bench, it could be like that. There's still an issue with this. So, let's say Cap's living in a branch reality that starts here, and he's living his best life. All the way from 1945 to 2023. You guys, oh, it is still on camera. Cool. 2023. So, he does that. He's with Peggy Carter. We know he's not with Peggy Carter in the main timeline, because that's not how time travel works with the quantum realm, and he traveled through the quantum realm. So he's in 2023. At some point, probably in 45, he gets a new shield. That's not a new one. But he gets a new shield from Howard Stark that he needs to give to Sam Wilson. So he takes his little shield here. He then jumps from 2023 back here, effectively deleting this because he's not supposed to be there. So boom. Captain America basically auto-deleted his existence by doing this. So he comes back here with his little shield so he can give it to Falcon. Where's the issue there? One of you can tell me. The issue is that the Captain America shield traveling through time causes a weird floater branch timeline that's just kind of like out here. Because the shield was from a branch, and then it branched from a branch. So there's a timeline out there that is just weird. Now, I mean, we could say the TVA came along and pruned whatever timeline the shield was from, but even then, we're looking at a shield that should be sort of auto-creating a branch timeline. Falcon should not have that shield. He should not have that shield. That shield is not supposed to be in 2023. Cap brought it into 2023. Which means that one thing by itself should be setting the MCU on a path like that. But it's not for some reason. I don't know. The MCU's just still the MCU. And so, that's Endgame, though. That's Endgame. And despite that one little thing, by the end of Endgame, the timeline's back to normal. Don't ask the writers about the ending of this movie. Don't ask the writers about this movie in general. Because they couldn't tell you. Which is sort of a red flag. But they don't understand how it works. So that's always fun. So now let's talk about Loki. Because Loki's the one that people say contradicts Endgame. And I'm sick of this argument, okay? Loki very clearly establishes that... Why is this still here? Loki very clearly establishes that the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, exists outside of time. Alright? So, how can you time travel if you're not in time to begin with? We don't know where exactly they sit. It's really, really bonkers. All we know is they're supposed to exist outside of time and they control the flow of it. So, let's use this example with this weird little timeline that Loki caused. So, Hunter B-15 takes her Minutemen. They jump from the TVA to right here in 2012 when Loki decided he was going to steal the Tesseract and do all sorts of shenanigans. They prune it. And they arrest Loki, and they just kind of delete this so it doesn't exist anymore. Now, the argument people have is if you're taking Hunter B-15 and she kidnaps Loki, that should cause a branch all by itself. Here's why that can't cause a branch. Traveling through time and traveling into time are different things. The Avengers took a controlled, navigated route from one point in time to another point in time. The TVA is starting outside of time and hopping into time at various points. So as far as the timeline's concerned, nothing is branching because there's no time shenanigans afoot. Hence, why they're able to do what they do and not cause branches, and why they're able to monitor the flow of time as He Who Remains tells them to do. That's my thing. I've been explaining this to people ever since Loki came out. I feel like a lot of people forget that the TVA existing outside of time means they can't screw with the timeline like that. They figured out a way to weaponize time, but they're not causing their own branches because they weren't there to begin with. So let me erase 1945 because now we need a hard reset here. Because we just covered Loki. Loki's the easiest one to explain. It really is the easiest one to explain. Now we have to talk about Miss Marvel, which is much easier to explain than Endgame, and probably the most fun one to explain, because the method of time travel that Miss Marvel uses is the coolest form of time travel. Why can't this board be magnetic? This marker actually has a magnet on it. Okay, enough playtime. We have a timeline to deal with here. So, Miss Marvel uses a completely different concept of time travel. Endgame's, of course, was the branch theory. Miss Marvel uses the closed loop theory, which is like the most common method of time travel in movies. It's what happened in Terminator. It's what happens in Prisoner of Azkaban also, where effectively you're going back in time to set in motion events that have already happened. Let's use Prisoner of Azkaban, for example. I don't know if you guys have watched that more than the Terminator, but let's use that for example. Harry goes back in time to save himself with the Patronus so then he can go back in time later to save himself with a Patronus. It's just a weird little loop we have going. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of subscribes to this also. So let's write this out. So Miss Marvel takes place in, 2024 I think it is? It's either 2024 or 2025. I'll say it's 2024. And the partition, I believe, I'm going to write 1940s. I'm Googling when, okay, 1947. I wanted to get this right. So 1947 is what Kamala Khan goes back to. Now the way this works is that by going here, she should be causing a branch if we're thinking of Endgame logic. But this is closed loop time travel. Meaning, Kamala is taking, right? So this is what the closed loop looks like. Boom. Boom. It's a loop. So what this means is that Miss Marvel saves her grandmother so that her grandmother can basically have the bangle that gets to Kamala Khan so that she can come back here in time to save her grandmother. Her journey still continues after this. She still continues on, but it's the loop that she ends up being put in. The loop breaks by her doing it, coming here, boom, she's good to go. But point is, she jumps back in time and directly changes the events of the future from the main timeline. But shouldn't that cause a branch and Miss Marvel happens in a different timeline? Or that this path of stars never happened? Because her, is it Nani they call her, says it was like the path of stars that saved her. Following Endgame rules, that path of stars should happen on a branch timeline and she should have no knowledge of that happening here. Here's why that works. I'm going to play the clip from Miss Marvel when she first time travels back. Okay, so here's the key thing. Look behind her when that bangle gets hit, and it is like the sky falls apart and she goes through it, which is effectively a breach in space-time. It's a complete tear in the fabric of reality, and when you have a tear in the fabric of reality, it basically means that storytelling rules are now whatever you want them to be. All physics, all previous concepts, it's all off the table because you're getting weird now. The quantum realm was not a break in reality. It was a controlled navigation from one point to the other. Miss Marvel was a break in reality, which meant the timeline went haywire and it just plopped her back here. It just effectively, instead of sending her through time, it just opened a hole, pulled her to a different point, and closed it along the same timeline. So that's why this is a closed loop instead of a branch, like in Endgame. Okay, whew! I did it. So that explains Miss Marvel, and that's why all three of these are different forms, but somehow don't contradict. So just to draw these out really, really quickly to just articulate my point, let's draw 3 blue lines. Okay, so to just draw out in one place as to why none of these contradict each other and why they all make perfect sense and can all exist within the universe. Endgame is a calculated navigation through time from one point that does this, right? Loki is traveling not through time, but from an undisclosed point outside of time into time, which causes this, and the timeline gets to continue as normal. And Miss Marvel is a break in the fabric of reality that causes that to happen, which is why all of these can exist. Now here's why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has to be its own separate video, because it utilizes multiple of these. It utilizes, at least I think, Endgame and Miss Marvel's form of time travel, and it kind of makes no sense. It's kind of bonkers. I'm still busy deciphering it, and I'll make a video on it in the future when I break it down. But there you guys have it. Those are the 3 forms of MCU time travel, why they all work, why they don't contradict, why it all makes perfect sense. Hopefully helping to give everyone, especially me, because I needed an understanding. So me explaining it allowed me to understand it myself. It's weird how that works, isn't it? Okay, I just bumped the whiteboard. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you thought it was insightful. I hope you at least thought it was entertaining. Maybe life-changing. You know, if YouTube gives you that little survey, say it was life-changing. That would be pretty cool. Anyway, leave a like on this video. Click on, hold on. Leave a like on this video, subscribe, click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from yours truly, especially because part 2 is going to come out at some point. You're going to want to watch that because that's where I really get to lose my mind thinking about time travel. Because I haven't yet. Anyway, that's going to be it. Hope y'all enjoyed. Have a great day, guys.